Welcome to this week's Desk Side Chat. The topic of conversation for the GAF Peer Pod this week is efficiently growing retirement plan business. And we are extremely excited to have a featured guest, Pino, joining us today to help us explore this topic. Ali, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get into the topic a little bit, Ali, if you could provide a little bit of a background on yourself. I know that retirement plans has been a focus for you in a number of different capacities over the years, and now you're with Spheriant. So if you could just provide a quick background on yourself before we dive into the topic.
Sure. So I actually got started in retirement plans straight out of college. So I was lucky enough to know someone through college whose father worked at John Hancock. And, was kind of looking through what I wanted to do. And I hadn't taken a single finance class at all throughout college. I was PR and communications. And I wanted to go into sales. And he said, you should come interview for me. So ended up on the sales desk doing 401k sales and supporting a sales rep out in the territory for about 8.5 years, and probably learned more in those 8.5 years than I ever could imagine. Everything from understanding plan design to investing to just how 401k plans run are different just from other investment vehicles. Then I was a relationship manager out in the field. So I managed a book of business for John Hancock. That was about 1.6 billion in assets across 600 or so plans. Everything from doing the relationship management of working directly with the business owner and the CEO on the investing side, but also employee education. So I worked directly with the employees. I then went over, I did that for about 5 years and joined Mass Mutual. So I went and wholesaled for Mass Mutual for a little over 4 years. And when they sold out, I kind of thought about, well, what do I want to do now? Do I want to get back into the wholesaling world? And got a phenomenal opportunity to come over and be a principal at Spheriant and grow the 401k side. So been doing that, and it's been a complete change over to the dark side, but it's been really fun. It really has, because it's different from the wholesaling kind of world and the provider side. But so spent about 17 years doing retirement plans, going on 18.
And we're very fortunate to have you involved, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of different aspects to retirement. I mean, it can be a very overwhelming topic. And a lot of the advisors that I've worked with in my career, individual, independent practices, 401ks, retirement plans can just be, it's such a difficult topic to get into. There's so many different nuances. I guess, just as a starting point, what have you seen advisors do who have been able to more successfully implement retirement plans as a, maybe not even as a focus, but just at least as a component of their overall business?
Well, I think when you're going out and you're prospecting, you're calling on a lot of the people that other people are calling on that are maybe been building their personal wealth practice for a longer period of time. I obviously went through that when I first started calling on and being a little bit greener and younger. But when you call on a retirement plan, you have access to not just one individual person. You're able to talk to all of senior management, all of the employees. For majority of employees within a retirement plan, the only investment account they have is that 401k. So most of them aren't working with advisors. So when you're going out and you're staying in front of the client, you're doing employee education, that's a captive audience of people that you can look to grow your practice. So when you go and prospect one person, that's one person, hopefully family members, a business of 50 people or 100 people, you get in there, those are captive prospects that you can then go ahead and kind of target.
And when you start getting into some of the bigger plans or plans that have more and more employees, obviously that is a great market. Those are people that you can talk to. Employee education is something that often is lacking in a lot of plans. So it can be a way to differentiate, but it also can be pretty overwhelming for advisors to bring that on and try to, again, the topic this week, be efficient in incorporating the plan. So how does an advisor, efficiently manage that time? Because
Mhm.
it can be quite overwhelming to run, especially plans that have more and more employees.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would not bite off more than you can chew at first, because there is a lot to learn in the retirement space and it's a different vehicle. So understanding a lot of the tax law and the plan design, that's where a lot of our questions come from. The investment side, most go into a target date fund or have pre-created portfolios that we'll put together. But I would really be a student of the business and try to learn more about the 401k side. There's phenomenal webinars and things. I think more going into it, the better you'll be set up to do. And I would start with some of the smaller plans. You could have a shop that might have 15 people. It could have a $2 million retirement plan. I think that's something that people don't realize when they first get into this business is healthcare. That's all driven on, well, how many employees do they have? So retirement's different. I mean, we have a 5-person company with 5 million in assets. They've had the plan forever. They've always invested heavily into it. So I think having starting small to kind of cut your teeth on some of those opportunities, but building out a service schedule, setting that service schedule up front. So, you go out, you get the paperwork signed. People like to know what's coming, but it also helps you be more efficient. So when are we going to do the investment review meeting and review the plan? When are we going to do employee education? I mean, for construction companies, for example, during their meetings that they'll have their safety meetings, it's a really good time to do employee education because everyone's there. Normally you're chasing down truck drivers and things like that. So they know when those are. Hopping on the schedule in advance. It shows that you're prepared, but it also allows you to know what's coming so you can prep in advance. And I would say if you're getting started, utilize your vendor partners. Absolutely. There are a lot of people that have been doing this a long time. They have a ton of knowledge, and there's a lot of tools and resources that the individual vendors will make that can help. But lastly, look to partner with an advisor. So we partner with tons of advisors. We don't have a personal wealth practice. It is not something we'll do. I like to stay in my lane and do what I'm really good at. So we, manage retirement plans solely and don't do any personal wealth at all. So we have a lot of advisors that come to us and say, would you mind helping me? Whether it's splitting the plan, and we take on the fiduciary liability surrounding the investments, or it could just be, we have some advisors that provide us the plan and we go ahead and we push the personal wealth management business that comes out of it back over to them. So that's another opportunity, is getting that partnership. We built a handful of those over the years, and our advisors we work with are like, it's a lot easier. They're like, I'm not chasing down answers anymore. So that's another option too.
Especially when you're working together, right? And not
Right.
in a competing environment where you're working hand in hand, complementing
Mhm.
one another, like you said, kind of staying in your lane. And we talked about this when you and I caught up last week a little bit about some of the things that you've encountered with some advisors who, maybe don't have as much experience, or kind of maybe are starting to move out of their lane a little bit. What are some of the mistakes, or some of the bigger things that catch your eye when you come across a plan that somebody has set up that maybe just doesn't have the type of experience that they should ahead of time?
Yeah, a big part comes from plan design. So we see a lot where plans are set up with a year of eligibility. So you have to be working at the company for a year and then you can enter every 6 months. And if you really think about that, you're potentially keeping an employee out of the plan for a year and a half, depending on when they got hired. So if they got hired, February 1 and the entry dates are January and July, they've got to go to year to January. Then they have to go another 6 months. So until the next entry date in July. So that's a big one. You look at why people are leaving companies right now, and it's because of retirement plan and benefits. So retirement plans kind of used to be a back burner benefit, but when you look at the Great Resignation and what's occurring and what's making one employee pick a company over another, the retirement plan is something they're focused on because COVID really exposed the gaps in some of the coverage that people had and the lack of saving that they had. So they tapped into their retirement. And that's why the plan has become so important. So eligibility is one thing we see. Shorten that eligibility, put it to match up with their healthcare. Give it to them after 30 days. You can allow them to defer their own money. Doesn't mean they have to have access to the match right away, but allow them to defer their own dollars, the employees, and then maybe make them wait 6 months or a year for the match. So that's something we see a lot of. And that's something that it doesn't really cost them any money to do that. And that's a nice value add. Because we did run across a CFO with a prospect who became a client that he was out of the plan for a year and a half, and before he could even enter. The other part we see a lot of is the investment side. I mean, the investment world for the 401k is different, and there's kind of good practice or best practice, I would say, for creating lineups. So we see, we really try to keep it as easy as possible. No redundancy, no common or misunderstood asset classes like global real estate or commodities or things like that. You have to think about the end user, and the end user is an employee, potentially a construction worker, or even we find nurses that are not well versed in investing. And again, keep in mind, their only investment account they have is that 401k. So this is kind of their first shot at it. So if you put some of those asset classes in there that are misunderstood, the biggest mistake you'd want to see is someone put all their money into emerging markets or global real estate. So we, really try to keep it to your large value, blend growth, mid cap value, mid growth, small value, small growth. Avoid some of the blends because that's just redundancy, and some in the international, and then your core fixed income, stable value. But a lot of times we'll see, and the target date funds, obviously, that's the most important part, because that's where majority of the money is going to go. Because then it takes the guesswork out of investing. That employee can really focus on how much am I saving, because that's the most important part. But we really try to keep it very trimmed down and easy so that the investment part isn't as confusing as most think it will be.
And I think that's such an important point. We got into this last week, and really this is another one of these evergreen topics is if you're engaging with a particular client on a very regular basis, they're going to often forget what you said. So even if in an employee education session and you go through and talk about investments and explain diversification and all these things, it's really going to probably swim over the top of the heads of a lot of people right then and there. But even if they do catch on, they may forget or and need to be reminded. So I think really trying to hone in, keep it simple, like you're saying, is important. When it comes to employee education and talking about that investment lineup, I guess, how do you do that, Allie? Is, obviously target date, like you said, can be an easy way and a simple solution, but for those employees that might want to expand beyond, how do you get into that topic where, and especially with somebody where maybe you might only talk to them once a year, if that, in an employee education session?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so first off, I love employee education. It's actually my favorite part of my job. There's nothing makes me happier. I hate sitting behind a desk. Nothing makes me happier than going out, talking to employees. Nothing's more satisfying than going to someone's retirement party, because most people think, well, I can't retire. The amount of times I've heard someone say in a meeting, oh, my retirement's a box in the ground. And I'm like, well, that's not what we're here for. We're going to try to make this a reality for you. And I think the biggest mistake that advisors make, and what we find and when we get feedback when we've taken over a plan, is talking over employees' heads. They don't understand investments. And I think maybe because I came into the industry with zero knowledge, I knew how hard it was to kind of learn everything. And I'm simple. I like to keep it really, really simple. So we just try to talk about diversification, and we start with what's, cash, stocks, bonds, explain it in very simple, easy terms, and then talk about, not putting all your eggs in one basket, and understanding that one area might do well during a different time period versus another, and try to really keep it very simple. I compare, when we go through that and actually get into creating a portfolio, it's the, do it for me, help me do it, or do it myself. So do it for me being a target date fund, help me do it being a risk-based fund, and do it myself, create my own portfolio. But I actually compare target date funds to Betty Crocker cake mix boxes. I'm a terrible baker, like the worst in the world. I'm like an okay cook, but really bad baker. And so I tell a story of, if I'm not a good baker, it's because I'm not sure how to pick and choose the ingredients, and then how much of each ingredient do I utilize. And so if you think about investing, it's the same way. A lot of people say, well, I'm not sure which investments to pick and choose, and then how much of my money do I put into each investment. So what target date funds have done is similar to Betty Crocker. Betty Crocker says, hey, look, I put all the ingredients in the box that you need. I put in the portions that you need. All you have to do is pick your flavor, funfetti, birthday cake remix, chocolate, like whatever you're feeling. That's exactly what a target date fund is. And, going out where a mutual fund manager goes out, picks all the investments for you, how much your money should go into each one, and you pick your flavor. Your flavor is the year in the future you'll retire. The amount of times you see the light switch kind of go on, it's things like that. Analogies are really, really good. Storytelling and employee education is really good because they can relate to that stuff. It's also a dry topic, so have some jokes handy. People like them, but I think if you go in there and you talk over people's heads, you're going to end up losing them. And keep in mind, the whole point of the plan is to make sure that those people sitting in front of you get to retirement. So if it's over their head, you're not doing your job and you're not doing right by that employee, because each employee is your client.
And also getting the buy-in from those employees, not just understanding and kind of knowing. I like that analogy. I was just thinking, I got another one for you. I've been doing HelloFresh. That's how
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a cook. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
This
makes
is a
makes
great
things
analogy.
easy. Yeah. I mean, so
Yeah.
like that's how I've been cooking, but that's, I think, something that, it could be used as an analogy, but it's not just talking over their heads, getting them involved and understanding. But then also, I think, once you get that buy-in, they might be able to increase their contribution, because now they all of a sudden they have a stronger buy-in, and they see, the benefits, or have a better understanding of what this actually means, for them in their retirement.
Yeah. And I think it's such a good point, because if you don't get their buy-in, they're not going to increase their contributions. They may not even participate in the plan. And they all talk to one another. So making sure that you have a pulse on what's going on. We did an enrollment meeting for a client that we took on, and they had warehouse staff and office staff. And one of the guys in the warehouse had been with the vendor we had put them with. And he said, well, my plan didn't do that well. And the warehouse manager called me and was like, hey, can you talk to this guy? Because he talks to a lot of the guys in the warehouse. And I kind of talked to him about, because a lot of employees don't realize it's not the vendor, it's not Spherient that's, driving how well, their plan does. They don't realize there are thousands of investments on the different platforms that are available. And it just depends on what they picked. So I had that conversation with him, and he was like, I never knew that. Well, this guy's very influential in the warehouse. So making sure that you kind of keep a pulse and that you are available. I mean, our clients have my cell phone number. I have employees call me all the time. They know they can. I'll pick up the phone, talk to them. It's just keeping that open line of communication. Now it's a little bit harder, I think, because we, like I said, don't do any personal wealth management. So this is what we do. So I think that's a little harder for some advisors, but employee education is just incredibly important. It's another thing that when employees are picking one company over another, they're looking at financial wellness. They want an employer that cares about them and can help better their financial future. And you can give that to them through the 401k plan. So we'll go out and present on anything from, budgeting, what's good debt, what's bad debt, going deeper into investments, do generational training. So depending on kind of where they are in their process, are they getting started, or have they saved already and they're getting closer to retirement, break it up by age. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And there's so much information out there from the vendors. We're an RPAG member, or RPAG. So we use a lot of their content too, but you don't have to recreate the wheel. So utilize the presentations that are there and tweak them to kind of fit you.
I mean, this is probably going to differ based on plan, based on the makeup of the employees, but what's a general rule of thumb as far as frequency, or how do you work all those different topics in? Because there are so many. I mean, you could be doing it on a very regular basis. How do you basically determine the right frequency for the amount of interaction and offerings that you give to the end employees?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake you can do is going out and doing employee education once a year, because then that's one time a year that you're getting them to think about the retirement plan. So you want to drip on them consistently throughout the year. So we build out a schedule where we have monthly newsletters that go out. They have a newsletter for the plan sponsor, or the CEO, HR. And then there is an employee memo that they can send out. It's like, don't sip away your lunch. And it talks about, or sip away your retirement. And it talks about buying lunch or buying coffee and the cost of what that is over a course of a year. It's about $1,200. Well, it's probably a lot more now, but when this was written, it was $1,200, and what that $1,200 could mean in retirement savings. So,
Compounded over
it's
time. Yeah. What it can mean. I mean, it's
yeah.
significant, right? Yeah.
So it's simple things like that. A reminder on beneficiaries, but you keep it monthly in front of them, and then be smart. You utilize YouTube and create pre-recorded videos. So if you have an enrollment video, have a pre-recorded enrollment video you can provide, because they might have employees, if they do monthly entry, you consistently becoming eligible for the plan. And then employee education can kind of vary. 4 times a year, I think, is overkill. I think you're going to lose people. They're not going to want to come. Some clients say it, and we kind of just try to discourage them, not because we don't want to do it, but you don't want to be too overwhelming and too much. Twice a year, once a year, I think is good. And, potentially doing an enrollment meeting for new employees. So sometimes what we'll do is divide it up and do new, and then do those that have been in the plan for a while and cover a different topic. But I would say probably once a year. But if you're doing those other touches and those other touch points of a monthly newsletter, or recording a video on just goal setting, or and sending that out, then you're still touching them on a more consistent basis, but not actually doing meetings face to face.
I think those are, great ideas, and that really speaks to the topic this week of efficiency. How do
Mhm.
you more efficiently manage this? Shifting gears a little bit from a pricing standpoint. So obviously, you do all these things. You're adding a significant amount of value to
Yeah.
the employer, to the employees. But in a lot of cases, when you're coming down to the decision makers or an RFP, it comes down to price and, well, how much does it cost? And it's hard to really convey that messaging of what is value and what is cost. How do
Right.
you balance that when you're taking on or prospecting a new plan, and really their focus is just on the cost?
I sold to advisors for what, 11, no, gosh, a lot more than that, like 13, 14 years. I sold products to advisors. I helped advisors grow their retirement plan business. The one thing I would always say is, don't devalue yourself right off the bat. There's fee compression happening everywhere. And if someone's willing to do it for an amount that is wildly outrageous and well below market, they're not going to get that level of service. Because I can tell you right now that broker is not going to be out there doing employee education. The plan's not going to be successful. And that's where I kind of, you really go back to our background and knowledge and expertise. I tell HR directors, I'm like, we're going to make your job easy. And then for the CFO and CEO is, we're going to remove your liability, and we're going to make sure that your employees get to retirement. Our job is to run your retirement plan while you run your business. Right now, so many are running their retirement plan and they're not running their business, or their, employee HR directors are pulled in like 10 different directions. So just really present your value, have a clear, concise message of what you're bringing to the table. And, know that there's a range. I also think we always talk about what level of fiduciary liability is your advisor willing to take on. It shows their level of expertise. So we sign on as either a 321 or a 338 investment advisor. We're removing that liability from them, because you'd be really shocked. The majority of advisors that are doing plans out there, because there's so many companies out there, just have 1 or 2 plans. So being able to really kind of show that value, because fee compression is happening to the providers. If you don't show your value, what's stopping them from saying, oh, I'll just go to direct to Fidelity or whatnot? And so have something kind of in your back pocket. I use the LegalZoom analogy. I said it to a bunch of lawyers. I'm like, they're talking about, well, we could do this online or we could go direct. I said, sure, you could. I can go to LegalZoom and get them to do my will. And they're like, oh no, we would never do, you shouldn't do that. This is why. And I'm like, that's why you shouldn't use direct. You need an advisor. No one's going to come out and talk to your employees in a direct environment. It's about the employees at the end of the day. So that, I think it's just really important to understand your value and be able to convey that and charge an appropriate fee. And also, reduce it over time, because as the assets grow, your fee should come down.
Well, that's an interesting point. You reduce it over time. So, and I like how you start that off, right? Don't undersell yourself. Don't
Yeah.
get into that battle of, if it comes down to cost, just, there's smart times to just walk away, right? If it's going to come down and it's
Yeah.
going to devalue yourself to that point. But that's an interesting point as well, of over time, as the assets increase, is going in and being proactive, not waiting
hmm
for it to come up on the other end, but being proactive in reducing the fee. So how do you do that typically, Allie? And how do you engage in that topic? Do you set that up with HR representative ahead of time, or is that something that just you let come up naturally over time? How do you set up that particular process?
So we build out a fee schedule based on the assets. And so based on asset bands, this is what we charge for the varying levels of service. And so having that service schedule, I think, is really important, because you can convey up front, here's where we are today. I have skin in the game. My goal is to grow your plan to this level. When I do, that all happens from employee education, getting employees to contribute more, engage more in the plan. It gives them a roadmap of where they're going. And it's really important to beat your vendors down. I was one of the vendors that got beaten down for years, so I get it. But understanding that as their plan grows, their average account balance gets better. That's what a lot of pricing is on, is plan assets, average account balance. They have, mostly a per head in mind of what it should cost. Make sure that their fees stay reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's value cost. I mean, it's, there's it's so important to make sure that everybody involved, again, employer and employees, understand it comes down to value.
hmm
Your value. Appreciate you being here and sharing all
Oh,
this insight. And like we talked about
you're
earlier,
welcome.
yeah, this is something we can come back to a lot, frequently. So this portion of the meeting we will post publicly, and so hopefully people can come across your information and your insight, beyond the Good Advisors Finish First Peer Pod. But inside the Peer Pod, we'll have you listed on our thought leadership directory,
Sure.
and folks can reach out to you. But I guess for the public, how do people get a hold of you or other great resources out there that might be able to help them on the planning side,
Yeah,
on
I
the
mean,
plan side?
I'm happy to help anybody that I can. I think at the end of the day, there's so much business to go around, and just making sure that we help each other grow. It's why I kind of joined Good People Finish First, and if I can be a resource, I'm incredibly happy to anybody. I mean, my email is apino, Pino @spherient.com. But I would also say utilize your vendor partners. I think I had a business coach tell me one time, I didn't use her. I probably should use her. I feel bad now that I say this and I'm giving her tips away. She's such a nice woman. But she would tell her advisors that, like, we know when you're a wholesaler that advisors are like running from you when you come into the office. They're like, oh gosh, we don't want to talk to them. And I used to
Until
hunt
they need
people
them,
down.
until you.
Right. And then you get the ones that avoided you for so long, and then they're like, oh, I need you now. I'm like, oh, okay, I see how this works. But she would always tell people when she coached them, don't run away from them. They're your best resource that you can have. They have phenomenal ideas. I call all my buddies now, and also they refer business to us. So getting good with your vendor partners. They have great resources. They have great ideas. Utilize them. Take them to meetings with you. They're trained to do this day in and day out. I mean, they go through presentation training. They're not going to make you look bad. They're only going to help you and make you look better. So I would really encourage you to utilize them as well.
Well, and let's actually delve into that just a little bit. So if I'm a new advisor, newer, right, and I'm
Mhm.
still kind of getting started, and I'm in, my head's swimming with all the different things going on, all the vendors, all the partners
Yeah.
that are calling on me, what would you suggest to be a good strategy for a new advisor who's looking to find the right partners to utilize and work with?
Um, you want to look to the ones that are going to support you and support your business. I think any wholesaler can come in and say that they're going to help, but really showing that value. Like if you're just getting started, something that I would do for my newer advisors is I would send them a list of plans, because obviously plans can be pulled up on Larkspur. You can run the list, you can see who the plans are, but um, talking points, how are they going to get in the door? So I would actually write out talking points for the advisor and say, these are the things that you should use during your first phone call to get your foot in the door. Know that whenever you're providing these talking points, obviously you need to understand them and why they're important, but you can't give them a solution without seeing what they have. So it's all about gathering that information, gathering that data. So look for a partner that's going to help support you in that way if you're early on. Maybe it's, find a way you also like to prospect. Not everybody likes public speaking. I love it. I don't mind it. So I don't mind doing big meetings and presenting on what we do. Some people don't like that necessarily. So find a one that's going to support doing small groups, and maybe do a lunch meeting and you invite business owners and they talk and you talk. But some that's going to help you prospect, whether it's a webinar and you want them to fund a portion of whatever you're going to give out in that webinar to people and send to people. Just find one that's going to support you, but also that has a good solid product, because you do need to push business to then the one that you end up utilizing. So vet the vendors, and everybody has their favorites, and don't overexpose yourself by spreading across 15 different vendors or 10. You have no buying power at that point with that vendor. They're going to look at your book of business and say, okay, this person has 10 million with us. Like we're going to help them on the pricing a little bit more. You know who to go to, and they know who you are. If you're using, say we probably have more than we should use, but working for the vendors before, I do know, we have those relationships kind of built in. I'd say pick about three or four, because you're going to want multiple to come in and present when you're actually going out and going to switch a vendor.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask you that, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Keep it small or tight,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, have your couple, but I guess if it comes time where you need to make a shift and change, how do you convey that messaging to the plan administrator if it's someone that you were partnered with and worked very closely with, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we need to make a change. How do you go about conveying that messaging to the
sponsor or the wholesaler?
To the provider, to the not I guess to both. I mean the sponsor as well as, but more so to the provider, to the HR director as they're putting in place a plan if you need to make a change.
A lot of times the writing's on the wall, like there's been an issue, there's service issues, or that's the majority of reason that they're looking to changes. There's been some pain of some sort. It could be, they want different resources. It could be that pricing's not coming down and their pricing's just not in line. And these are all reasons that we put a plan out to bid. So the HR director is normally okay with it, because they're experiencing the pain and there's a reason for the move. And it's, for us, we're vendor agnostic. So it doesn't matter which vendor a plan is with. We can work with any of them and normally fix their issues. But like we took over a plan and they were changing payroll vendors, and one who they were with didn't integrate their pricing. They didn't integrate with the record keeping system. Their pricing wasn't coming down. So we ended up moving them for that reason. What I would say is give your vendors a shot to make it right, especially if they're a good partner of yours. Go to them and give them a heads up. Say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you help me? For two reasons. It's the right thing to do. And it shows that you value the partnership. They get it. Some plans have to leave for obvious reasons, but they want a shot at making it right first. And then kind of, the second part behind that is the change of moving to a new vendor. There are steps involved and there is a process for it. And depending on the vendor, it can be a lot of work for the HR team. So understanding what those steps are so you can kind of mitigate how much they're involved. But you don't want to move a plan just to move a plan. And your vendors will appreciate it if they get a shot to make it right. And then if they can't, they understand if they have to leave.
Yep. It's all comes down to just being as transparent as possible, being very upfront and just saying, like you said, if it comes down to pricing or something, right? It's like, hey, here's what we need. Can you do this? And if it's no, then you're, very much you're very much in the clear as far as, maybe not
Right.
blowing up that relationship, because you're explaining exactly the reason why things are happening a
Mhm.
certain way, but you're also then really demonstrating your value,
Right.
because you are agnostic. You can make those pivots as you need to.
Right. Yep. I just think it's important because things can be fixed, but also pricing isn't always what it seems. So be careful. There's a lot of little levers that can be pulled. Ask them to map everything to your S&P 500 because that's the pricing you want in your proposal, not with anything else in there. And probably your vendor's going to kill me, but it's the reality. I want to know where we are baseline. What is your cost? Because if down the road they decide to take out your target dates and you're going to jack the price up, like that's not good for my client. That's a horrible spot for me to be in. So give me your price and let me understand if you add this in or you do this type of conversion, I get X amount off. Map to the S&P 500. Don't let them put their own stable value in there. You really want to see like true transparency because if it changes down the road, the pricing gets out of whack, they're going to look to you as to, well, why didn't you know that was going to happen? Then they got to go through a change.
Yep. So many things to be thinking about and taking
Yeah,
on. And that's why, again, we're very fortunate to have you as a kind of resident expert in our group to help provide some insight on these things. And again, this is something that we're going to be going back to probably many times
sure.
in the months ahead. But for now, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and end this public portion of the meeting. We'll
Cool.
bring on any members who want to engage in our backstage pass portion. But Allie, thank
Cool.
you so much for joining us this week. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was fun. My first live stream.
You did great. It was great.